Hey there, thanks for tuning into Duckbricks. I'm Chris, and this March, LEGO is releasing their latest helmet bust set, the AT-AT Driver. And that got me thinking, how many times has LEGO created a set like this? With a line of helmets going strong since its inception in 2020, LEGO seems to be putting out more and more variations of sets like these. But there were actually a lot more than just this style of set. And today, we're going to be diving into a history of every single LEGO bust, helmet, or really just any sort of display set like this to talk about how some LEGO building techniques might have shifted around over the years and what things just remain the same. Join me now for a walk through LEGO history, taking a look at busts and helmets. Alright, it's time to dive back into LEGO history. LEGO busts, helmets, or character-shaped builds are pretty common nowadays. Since 2019 and 2020, when we first started seeing LEGO Star Wars-themed helmets, we have been getting a ton of these across a plethora of different themes. Sonic the Hedgehog, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, you name it, a lot of these themes have been receiving a pretty regular helping of busts since 2020. But the very first LEGO bust was actually all the way back in 2001, as part of the Ultimate Collector series for LEGO Star Wars. Hot off the heels of the Phantom Menace launching in 1999, Darth Maul was all the rage, and so set number 10018, simply titled Darth Maul, was released. It came with 1,868 pieces, and at the time, retailed for $150 US, which sounds like a pretty good deal. Until you actually calculate for inflation and realize that equates to about $262 today, which, given the fact that many of the pieces are just standard bricks, is pretty crazy. Now, if you want to buy a used copy of this set on Bricklink, it's going to cost you around $350 to $400, but a new and sealed copy is pretty ridiculous. In fact, one sold just last month for $7,488, which is just insane for a sealed set. Part of that is because this set contained 4 copies of the LEGO 4x4x6 cylinder quarter, which is a pretty common piece nowadays but launched in 2001 for the first time, and specifically has only appeared in black in this set as well as another set that came out in 2001, the Ogle Control Center for LEGO Alpha Team, which had its own set of production problems after a comic in the instructions depicted the plane in the set bombing a city, causing LEGO to be forced to pull it after September of 2001. And later re-release it in limited quantities with the comic removed and changed. Because of this, those pieces alone are probably some of the most expensive parts of the set. Just one single black cylinder quarter, and again you need 4 of them for the base, would cost you around $40 a piece on Bricklink, which again is crazy for a single piece, but makes a little more sense when you realize that anybody buying this piece is probably going to be buying it to be able to piece together the Darth Maul bust, which otherwise is actually pretty easy to put together, using pretty much just standard bricks. Aside from a couple of weird 4x18s and 4x10s, this is pretty easy to just piece together, even just using parts you can get off a pick-a-brick nowadays, and that's absolutely what I would recommend, and that's actually how I was able to put together my own copy. Speaking about the styling of the set, it's one of the most interesting sets that we had ever gotten from LEGO. 2001 was a bit of a weird time for the company, where they were being incredibly experimentative with all sorts of different building techniques. Bionicle, of course, famously launched in 2001, but that wasn't it. It was the same year they were in the process of developing Project Genesis, an action figure themed replacement to LEGO's building blocks that pretty much just culminated in the failure of LEGO Galador, and all throughout the company there was a sense of throw anything at the wall and see what sticks. Obviously, some stuff stuck, like LEGO Star Wars and LEGO Bionicle, while others didn't fare so well, and this is a really interesting example of a set that LEGO would never ever make today. It's much more akin to a large-scale sculpture of a model that you would see built by master model builders at Legoland parks around the world or Legoland Discovery Centers, and it's pretty much in that exact same style. The instructions of the set are also bizarre, featuring a top-down view that can get very disorienting very quickly. They pretty much only use this style of building for this set, the Statue of Liberty set, and the minifigure set, all of which have some pretty strange quirks to them, which make them fairly difficult to assemble today and definitely not something that LEGO would release nowadays. I have to give it to the designers though, this is incredibly well done. The face looks really good, and it's among one of the best LEGO sculptures they've ever put out because it's just such an unorthodox model to put together. It's using pretty advanced for the time techniques like studs in the side for the chin and the nose, really capturing the tattoos, which is a really hard thing to do for an actual LEGO sculpture, and unlike most of the other helmets and busts we'll see on this list, this character is pretty much just a human character, albeit with a very strange skin pattern, but a human character nonetheless, which LEGO hasn't really dared to attempt in bust format. Sure, they've done stuff like Chewbacca as a full-scale figure, which is pretty horrifying to look at the face, but that's kind of the closest thing they've come to making a large-scale human face as an actual build. And you have to commend the designers all the way back in 2001 because they absolutely knew what they were doing when putting this together. Of course though, I can see why maybe this figure didn't do too well. In addition to the building instructions being really confusing and it being a very challenging build even for someone like me nowadays, the face is kinda scary. There's something kind of demonic about staring at it, and I guess that's the entire point of Darth Maul as a character, but I can absolutely see even the most die-hard LEGO collectors thinking twice before wanting to put this in their LEGO collection and have it stare them down anytime they enter the room. For me, on the other hand, I decided to put mine front and center, corner caddy across the entire collection because I like my collection being watched at all times. Moving on from this though, there was a period of dark ages for LEGO brick-built helmets and busts. Sure, we got stuff like a buildable Yoda, but that wasn't quite the same because it was a full-body sculpture. And also note that that also used the same top-down instruction building strategy, which clearly was just on its way to being phased out after 2002. But it wouldn't be until many years later until we would actually get our next LEGO bust, 2018 to be exact. For San Diego Comic-Con 2018, LEGO produced 75997, simply titled Ant-Man and the Wasp. It featured the Wasp minifigure and a brick-built bust version of Ant-Man, and I honestly struggled to decide as to whether or not this counted on my list, because obviously it is meant to be just a large-scale version of Ant-Man for the Wasp to fly alongside, with just the rest of the body just not being built for the size constraints of the set, but given that this is pretty much the mask, head, and shoulders down, I figured it made total sense to include in this showcase. Because this was a San Diego Comic-Con 2018 exclusive, if you want a new and sealed copy of this set, you have to pay around $250 for it, despite the fact that it only has 218 pieces. That's over $1 a piece, but honestly, when it comes to Comic-Con exclusives, that's not even that bad, and a lot of that boils down to the fact that this doesn't have any exclusive pieces or minifigures in the set, making it something that you can piece together using your own elements, which is exactly how I made mine, because I do not collect boxes, and the box would have been pretty much just useless to me. It's pretty rudimentary for what it is, and I'm kinda surprised we haven't gotten a more updated modern version of the Ant-Man helmet, given how iconic it is at this point thanks to the Ant-Man and Avengers movies, and how it would make for a really interesting brick-built sculpture. I'm sure a modern-scale large helmet for Ant-Man would use a ton of interesting building techniques, and personally, that'd be something I'd most want to see next out of the Marvel helmet lineup, which so far has really only done Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Venom and Carnage, and those were basically identical, but we're getting ahead of ourselves. Moving on from 2018, our next series of busts came in the form of the Darth Vader bust. This is a really interesting set. 75227 was a Darth Vader bust which was exclusive to Star Wars Celebration Chicago in April 2019. However, LEGO also just randomly decided to make it a Target online exclusive, meaning that anybody else who wanted to could just purchase this set direct from Target for $40 US, which is really nice, and something I kinda wish they did for the rest of the San Diego Comic-Con exclusive sets, because it would have just allowed more folks to be able to get them. I really do feel that LEGO was testing the waters with this bust. It's a smaller scale than what we are seeing nowadays for the helmets, and they obviously were trying to gauge fan reception. If this didn't do well and people didn't like it, I'd imagine that maybe the busts and helmets that we see nowadays wouldn't even exist, and I wouldn't be making this video because there'd be only 3 or 4 of them to talk about. But clearly, people really loved the idea of brick-built character figures, and LEGO was clearly iterating on this for a long time. Development images from as far back as 2008 show that LEGO in their model shop was creating large-scale builds of character helmets and faces even back then, but clearly just weren't quite sure if they would translate well to an actual product you could buy. But thanks to the advent of LEGO icons and the 18+ branding, LEGO decided it was the perfect time to release a more display-oriented set, and this was the trial run. In 2019, the Darth Vader bust would have set you back $40, but nowadays if you want to pick up a new copy, it's going to be around $170, especially because it was so annoying and hard to get. It was only available for 1 month online from Target.com in the United States, which I remember was pretty hard to get, and they had a purchase limit as well, so there weren't a lot of these to go around. Later that year, they decided to do the exact same style of bust, except this time for the Sith Trooper from Star Wars Rise of Skywalker, a movie that I've absolutely erased from my mind and recommend you do as well. It contained 484 pieces, and I guess at Comic-Con retailed for around $40, but unfortunately, unlike the Vader bust, this was never available online for the general public to purchase, and it was exclusive to San Diego Comic-Con 2019, similar to the Ant-Man bust. It's really cool putting this side by side with the Vader bust because you can clearly see these were meant to be the same exact scale, and nowadays a new copy of this is probably going to set you back around $350 to $400, whereas a used copy, because anyone can piece it together given that it doesn't contain any exclusive pieces, is only going to cost you around $80, but I was able to part mine out for closer to $40, which was the original price of the set. This to me is actually a big improvement over the Vader one. While they were clearly designed at the same time, they were built by two different designers, and I actually like the Sith Trooper bust better because I feel like it just captures the overall proportions and shaping of the helmet of the First Order Stormtroopers really well, whereas the Darth Vader bust is a little simplistic, it's very blocky in its shaping, and LEGO would do it much better just a few years later. I know I was dogging on Rise of Skywalker just a few seconds ago, but I'm gonna be honest, the Sith Troopers looked really cool, and this is actually something I would love to see LEGO try again in the helmet collection and really do a more full-scaled helmet, bringing things all the way back full circle, which I think would be an amazing set, but probably something they wouldn't do given that we haven't really seen anything related to the sequel trilogy since the movies were coming out, because LEGO obviously wants to make sets that sell well, and sets based off of that trilogy probably will not. But by the time 2020 rolled around, the fan reception to these busts was so positive that LEGO just went ahead and decided to release their own new line of helmet sets, starting off with LEGO Star Wars. There are so many of these sets nowadays, so much so that I'm not going to show you every single one individually, we're just going to take a look at all of them as a group. We started off in April of 2020, where we got a set of 3, the TIE Fighter pilot, the Stormtrooper helmet, and the Boba Fett helmet, and I feel like for a set of 3, these were pretty good ones to start with. I maybe would have swapped the TIE Fighter pilot with something like Darth Vader's helmet, but we would get that just a year later, so fans wouldn't have to wait that long. Out of all of these, I actually really like the TIE Fighter pilot helmet. I find it super unique how it has the hoses that actually connect to the stand. The shaping is really well done, especially because it was basically their first attempt at a Stormtrooper style helmet, but as we're about to see for the newest set in 2025, the building techniques were about to get a lot better. The next year, in 2021, we received a couple of helmets in April, specifically Darth Vader's helmet, which is maybe my favorite helmet they've ever made. I think it is just by and large the best one. The shaping is perfect, it just looks really good and menacing, and it just looks exactly like a one-to-one replica, as well as the Scout Trooper helmet. Darth Vader's helmet, though, was one of the most expensive of the bunch, retailing for $80 US, although it does come with the most pieces, 834, as opposed to something like the Scout Trooper helmet, which came with 471 pieces for $50. One thing that's pretty interesting that you'll see across the helmet collection is they kind of got rid of the idea of busts and decided to just go ahead and make the helmets by themselves, which I actually think was a pretty smart choice. It allowed them to focus on what was important, which was a helmet, and not waste any bricks trying to build the shoulders or just the top of the body of a character, which is pretty unnecessary for a set as detailed as this. It allowed them to also scale up the helmets, adding in an extra layer of detail, and I really appreciate the scale they went with. In March of 2022, we received our next set of helmets that was themed around the Mandalorian. Specifically, we got one for the Mandalorian, one for a Dark Trooper, and one for Luke Skywalker's Red 5 helmet, which I guess wasn't explicitly themed around the Mandalorian, but by the time these sets were coming out, obviously it tied in very well to Season 2's finale. All of these are pretty interesting. The Mandalorian helmet is surprisingly not a reskin of the Boba Fett helmet at all, and they are not afraid of doing reskins in this series, as we're about to see for the superhero stuff, but it actually is a pretty original build, and that's because the Mandalorian's helmet is quite different than Boba Fett's in the show. They managed to make the visor a little narrower, it has more curved cheekbones, and overall is just a bit of a different shape, and that's something I appreciate. I also love the drum lacquered elements on this one as well, just making it feel a bit more premium. I think the one I'm least convinced by, and maybe one of my least favorite helmets, is the Dark Trooper one. I don't know, just something about it doesn't quite look like the Dark Troopers in the show, but again, since it is such a niche and obscure thing, I can definitely see this one maybe wasn't as popular as some of the others, especially because the Mandalorian helmet is still available to purchase today. 3 years later, you can literally still buy it from LEGO.com, which clearly shows that, yeah, this was a pretty successful build. The following year, in 2023, we got some other of my favorite helmets in the form of Captain Rex's Phase 2 helmet and Commander Cody's Phase 1 helmet, as well as one themed around Return of the Jedi with Princess Leia as Bush. These 3 helmets are some of the best ones they did. I know a lot of folks complained about the Captain Rex one with the weird shape of the front mouth, and I agree, it does look kinda weird, but from most angles it's okay, and it was just really cool to finally get prequel era and Clone Wars era helmets because that was something fans were really asking for. Helmets took a break in 2024, but this year they are back in 2025 with the AT-AT Driver helmet. This is a really interesting one, and it's very fascinating to go back to 2020 and compare this next to the Stormtrooper helmet and the TIE Fighter Pilot helmet, both of which are very similar to this particular shape of build. And you can clearly see that LEGO is deciding to take a very different approach with helmets like this, shifting away from so many exposed studs and trying to make things feel a bit more smooth and curved. And this is going to be very obvious when we take a look at some of these superheroes ones, which are even more curved and smooth. The AT-AT Pilot helmet is a really interesting build. It's very different than the other helmets. It uses a lot of internal clips and different pieces mounted at slight angles to really achieve the building techniques, and I'm actually pretty happy with it. My only complaint is that it is a little more fragile than the other helmets, and the front grille does take a little bit of arranging to actually get it to align correctly, other than showing colors in the center which you really want to avoid, but otherwise it's a really solid build, and a cool evolution to show just how far LEGO can come in 5 years. But Star Wars wasn't the only theme getting helmets just like these. Superheroes got in on the fun as well, and the next category is Marvel. In August 2020, we got 76165, the Iron Man helmet with 480 pieces for $60, and I'm gonna be honest, I am not a big fan of this one. I feel like it over-relied on these larger, smooth elements, especially on the front of the helmet, that don't really capture what Iron Man looks like as the actual helmet itself. Especially looking at it front on, it just feels a little too wide and flat. It's hard to put my finger on why this doesn't look right, but I think that anyone can look at it and say it doesn't really feel like Iron Man from the movies. Now, LEGO is actually trying this again. Rumors are pointing towards a bust Iron Man set coming out later this year, which is kind of coming full circle because, again, these are just helmets, and that also seems to be part of a new series of sets they're doing that are more bust-like instead of helmets, featuring at least some part of the torso of the character, I'm gonna guess probably scaled down from the helmets themselves, and there's also one rumored for Iron Spider as well, so I'm really excited to see what LEGO is cooking for those, and I think it's gonna be a really good chance to kind of redo Iron Man and redeem this one. The drum lacquered gold parts are cool, but I would count it among one of the weaker helmets that we got from LEGO in general. The next Marvel helmets, or I guess heads in this case, came in the form of Venom in April 2021, and in May of 2021 we got Carnage as well, both of which were loosely meant to tie in to Let There Be Carnage, although it never explicitly said that on the box. As opposed to the Stormtrooper helmets or even something like Boba Fett versus the Mandalorian, the Venom and Carnage helmets are identical, down to the fact that they actually have an asymmetrical detail. One of the eyes is a little bit larger than the other, which I actually really really like as a detail, but I guess since they did it on literally both Venom and Carnage, it kinda takes away from making them feel unique. The only difference in the build is that Venom has a tongue sticking out of the mouth, and he also has some green drool kind of dripping down from the teeth, which is one of my favorite details of the set. You can even see it pooling on the stand, which is really cool, and I definitely like how they were able to make that feel a bit more special. Strangely, Venom cost $70, but Carnage cost only $60. I don't really have a good explanation for that, other than the fact that maybe due to the price increases, they bumped the price up, because Venom lasted for 2 years and 8 months, being discontinued at the end of 2023, whereas Carnage was discontinued by the end of 2022. Moving on from that, we only got one other Marvel-themed helmet so far, but before we go to that, we should take a look at one of the other large-scale busts that we got, and this is one of the most controversial sets we're going to look at today. 76215, simply titled Black Panther, was a full-on Black Panther bust, retailing for $350 and containing 2,961 pieces. Now this was one of the most controversial sets of all time, and because of the low popularity of the set, I remember seeing this on sale at a lot of LEGO stores as they were trying to clear out their inventory. I feel like there were a couple missteps taken with this set. Now, the set by itself, honestly, isn't really that bad, and actually when images of this first released, and even after I first put it together, I had a much more negative opinion of the set than I do nowadays, and comparing it next to images of the actual Black Panther mask, yeah, I think it could have been more curved down the bottom, the shaping could have been a bit better, but honestly, Black Panther's mask is kinda smooth and almost shapeless, and I feel like this does do a fairly decent job, maybe not a good job, but a decent job at capturing a lot of the shapes. I certainly like it a lot better than the Iron Man helmet because this is at least very clearly recognizable as the Black Panther from the MCU. The thing that really drags this down though is really the entire concept behind the set. I feel like a $60 or $70 Black Panther bust or helmet in the same style as the rest of the helmet collection would have done pretty well. At the same time, a Black Panther claw set sold by itself, similar to how they were selling the Infinity Gauntlets by themselves because this is literally the same scale, probably would have done pretty well too. I think that would have made a really cool display piece, and of course, if you really wanted to, you could buy 2 copies of the hands, and then you could buy the helmet, and then you could have a display that looks like this. And if LEGO really wanted to, they could even include instructions where you can maybe reverse the orientation of the claw so you could build a right side or a left side or get both to do the Wakanda Forever cross. I feel like there were multiple things they could do to split this up into 2 sets. But instead, they decided to go incredibly big, making this one of the largest Marvel superhero sets ever, which is absolutely insane to me. I have asked people internally within LEGO a lot of questions about why they decided to make this set in particular a large-scale build, and while I haven't gotten any real official answers for them, let me just say you can probably put 2 and 2 together with the timing of the release of the set coming out in October of 2022, and LEGO was trying to target different demographics with this one. I totally understand that, and I'm all for that, but it definitely feels like they missed the mark by making this a little bit too large and just way too big compared to what it should be as a LEGO set, and I'd personally love to see them try doing Black Panther again, maybe doing Shuri's version of the mask in an actual smaller scale helmet, because I feel like that would do pretty good. But moving on from this back to the standard helmet collection, there was one other helmet and one other mask. April 2023 introduced us to Star-Lord's helmet, set number 76251, which came with 602 pieces and retailed for $80 US. This is one of the most unique helmets because it actually doubled as a pencil holder. That's right, because Star-Lord's helmet just kind of wraps around his face, the top of it is completely hollow, which is something none of the other helmets have done so far, and actually a pretty interesting style of build. I like it for what it is, and I think it is pretty accurate to what it looks like in the movie, but I will say it is a bit of a strange choice for the helmet collection because it is just a wraparound mask, and I feel like maybe something else, like again that Ant-Man helmet, would have been a more interesting set to fill this slot. The latest Marvel superheroes mask that we've gotten has been Spider-Man's mask, releasing in January of 2024. It came with 487 pieces, although many of them were large printed pieces, which is why it retailed for $70. And I really like this one. This to me is the culmination of what LEGO can do with the mask style. From a distance, it almost doesn't look like LEGO. That's how good this is. As opposed to the early days of the helmet collection, this almost feels like it's made by a completely different company. It is nearly studless, the only studs being when they absolutely were needed for some of the curved elements. Instead, it relies on a lot of these large curved elements, a number of stickers and prints to achieve the web-like texture on the mask. And I love how the eyes are brick built as well. The white and black of the eyes just looks really good. It's very vibrant on display, and it's one of the most colorful helmets out of all of them, and that's why I really like it. I appreciate it for what it is. It's super unique, and it definitely is one of my favorites they've ever done. But moving on from that, LEGO Batman also got in on the fun when it came to superheroes' helmets and cowls, and both Batman cowls have been a little mixed. April 2021 brought us the Batman cowl. It's not really based off of any specific one, mostly just meant to be something generic from the comics, and it had 410 pieces retailing for $60 for some reason, and it's kinda weird. They did something a bit unique with the base on this one, having it be a transparent stand, which is interesting. I almost kind of like it better than the standard black stands of the other masks, and they kind of just built the cowl around it. It's a really interesting one to choose to depict in LEGO form because obviously Batman usually has most of the lower skin showing, so it was a bit of a strange choice for the cowl to be made as a helmet series set, and I think that because of that, it does hurt the set that it literally is just the cowl. The mouth element feels very strange. It is just a large transparent black piece, which I guess totally fits for what they're trying to do, but I feel like maybe this just wasn't the right style of set to depict in this form. I don't know, I think it's okay, and this is definitely one that I'm sure folks maybe either really like or really don't like. I'm kind of ambivalent on it, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. For DC, they went ahead and did Batman again with the classic TV series Batman cowl just later that year in October of 2021. This one also used a fully transparent stand, although this time it is the only cowl that is actually detachable from the stand, and it's not even attached on any studs, which make it a little annoying to move around. This I actually do like a lot better than the first attempt at the comics cowl because this one very clearly is just the cowl by itself, and I feel like the Adam West Batman headpiece is just very blocky and square and lends itself very well to a build like this. So overall, this one is definitely better for me than the previous one, although I really do hope that LEGO will branch out for DC helmets and not just do Batman. There are so many other DC characters that could get really interesting brick-built cowls or helmets, and Batman is just getting two of them at once, which I feel was a little unnecessary. I know it would probably never happen unless James Gunn really cooks and brings him into the DCU and it's doing well enough to warrant it, but I would love to see a Dr. Fate helmet. I feel like that could go so hard. A Hawkman or Hawkgirl cowl would be super interesting as well. Blue Beetle's mask would be really interesting as a piece to do. I think that would be super cool. Red Hood is another obvious one that comes to mind, and I personally would also love a Peacemaker helmet, although due to the R-rated nature of the character, I'm sure LEGO would never even touch that one, although I'm sure Machus could try their hand at it. Moving on from DC though, there was only one other theme that received this treatment, and it's a weird one. Sonic the Hedgehog got one, but not for Sonic himself. October 2024 brought us set number 77000, Shadow the Hedgehog, which deviates from the helmet collection in a couple of pretty notable ways, in the fact that the stand is completely different. It's more cartoony, it's more comic styled, it's more game styled, sort of along the lines of the Sonic sets, which I guess was made because these Sonic sets themselves are more kid oriented, so the bust was made to be a little bit more friendly and more fun for the kids to actually have some detail on the stand. But then of course it uses the same exact design for the nameplate, and by and large the basic same scale as the other helmet, so I totally count it as part of this collection, and this is another really controversial one. A lot of people are really freaked out by this face. I've seen a lot of folks online saying it just looks freakish, it looks uncanny, it looks like his decapitated head mounted on a pike. And honestly, I don't really see the criticism. I'm one of the people that actually really likes this one, and maybe it's just me, but I feel like the sculpting is about as good as it can be, especially depicting an organic character. Once again, it is the only character in the Helmet series, I guess other than Venom and Carnage, but they kind of have their own unique look to them, that is meant to depict an actual living, breathing, organic, flesh and blood character, instead of just a helmet someone is wearing or a mask. Because of that, it has its own unique challenges as a LEGO set, but I just love the parts usage here. The curved, sort of dome-like element they introduced for LEGO City Space is a really cool touch for the forehead. I like the usage of the curved elements on the side, the printing for the mouth is nice, and my favorite part are the quills on the back of the head. I just think those are done really nicely. Maybe I'm a little biased because this was designed by a really talented Bionicle mockist who recently joined the LEGO group as a designer, but of course, bias aside, I genuinely do think this is not as bad as everyone's making it out to be. And with that, we've taken a look at every single one of the LEGO busts, helmets, or otherwise. This is just the beginning, and in a few months, this video is going to become outdated if any rumors are to be believed about the Iron Man and Iron Spider busts, which are coming soon. And those are probably the ones I'm most looking forward to because it's LEGO trying out a completely new style for a LEGO set, and I'm very curious to see what those are going to look like. Overall though, it's a really interesting collection, and I find it fascinating how LEGO picked it up in 2001 and just decided not to really do any of these style of sets until 2018, a whole 17-year gap, which is crazy for a style of set. I just love how you can compare some of these sets side by side and see how much LEGO has changed. Even just putting the Darth Maul bust next to the Black Panther bust, which again isn't a perfect set and has a lot of flaws, it's really cool to see just how LEGO building techniques have shifted over the years, and how the design philosophy of LEGO sets as a whole have been completely revitalized and redesigned compared to what they used to look like back in the day. Altogether, it was really satisfying being able to line all of these up and showcase the collection all at once. And of course, I'm sure I'm forgetting some here and there, so do let me know down in the comments if I'm missing any. The only other one I can really think of is the LEGO Ideas Magic of Disney, which kind of has a brick-built Mickey head, but it also has his hands, and I'm gonna be completely honest with you, that set is sitting in my backlog. I have not gotten a chance to build it yet, and I fly out to Switzerland in about 4 hours. It's 2 AM right now, so I would just like to go to bed, and I think I've covered almost all of the ones that I wanted to cover, and pretty much every single LEGO bust in LEGO history, helmet or otherwise. Let me know what you think and which ones are your favorites down in the comments below. What do you think of the new 2025 AT-AT driver helmet? How do you think it stacks up compared to some of the older helmets they were doing? Do you prefer the more studded style, or do you like it being very smooth? Personally, I think it all boils down to personal opinion, so I'm very curious to hear what folks have to say. That's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for even more LEGO news, reviews, discussion, and analyses coming your way very soon. Bye for now.